Welcome to Slash Forward. The question of the day is, how many fingernails need to be pulled out to induce enough pain to save your life? I believe it's 4 to 14 depending on circumstances. It's hard to know for sure, but we will sort out the details as we watch this group of strangers try to buy their freedom by participating in some silly torture games. We're going to find out who survives and who has the gumption to take the necessary action to ensure their safety right now. Let's get to it. We open with a warning about the pitfalls of science from Gandhi. We then find a well-developed male subject, supine and strapped to a table. It's a unique kind of surgery where they wait for you to come to before cracking your sternum open. This is a research clinic with advanced equipment, but where they utilize an indelicate technique with a vindictive bedside manner. But all of this is for a good cause. They act as a prestige apothecary delivering choice narcotics to those in need. We are then transported into an LFO music video where Taylor ponders life among the fresh lilies while working up the courage to reveal that she's pregnant. As the young adults wake up to a new day, she decides that she's just not ready yet. So she instead lays with her man Nick. They engage in your standard wilderness banter while creating memories to last a lifetime. Then Tony finds the perfect moment to interject and remind them that work is calling. So their time out here in nature is limited. Sure enough, we find them loading up and rolling out at dusk. They drive into the night, eventually pulling up to the local hillbilly gas station. While pumping, they also pick up a wayward traveler who has found herself out here in the boonies gasless. Taylor gets a bit catty about welcoming strangers into their friend group, so Diane introduces herself. See, now you're all friends, and they are soon on their way. Nick tries to get a good look at their guest, which raises the tension level in the car. And Tony tries to bring things down a bit by complimenting Diane on the way she smells. Before they all explode in various ways, the abandoned car comes into sight. She offers to hook them all up with some free samples of her perfume, and when she returns, she really applies it liberally. Through pulses of consciousness, we see they're surrounded by others contemplating whether or not they should fulfill a task. And they wake up right as Greg steps up to do what's necessary, which involves taking some pliers to a confused Kai's nail bed. Tony doesn't like anyone else removing his lady's fingernails, so the boys break free and square off. The scuffle is ended when Julian pipes up to reveal that they're actually all prisoners. This is a situation of duress. There's this video, you see, they did what they did because of the video. If they saw the video, they might begin to understand. So gentle Sam leads them upstairs to the video. They file up and are greeted by a woman who explains that their captors are looking to siphon some juices off their brains, and the mix they're looking for happens to be created through experiencing pain. They have a quota to fill in 24 hours to fill it, which really is the most efficient method of getting at them juices when you think about it. Now that they're all allies, there are introductions all around. They recount the failed attempts they've already made to get out, leaving them limited options. In response to Tony's incredulity, Tara reveals that she totes heard about a drug made from dopamine and adrenaline and whatnot. Her cousin told her about it. Either way, they have to get started because Greg's little stunt began the timer. They're not happy with the situation, but they don't want to see what happens when that clock hits 0. Then Julian reveals a connection between him and Greg before losing his ever-loving mind. Sam suggests they vote on splitting the load and just getting it over with, which the majority agrees with. Dissatisfied with the result, Julian bumps the progress bar, but as a natural byproduct of the pain involved in removing his collection device, which both kills him and removes his progress from the board. Bummer. Tara wants the men to step up, but they all have priorities, and Greg has kids, so
if I have to personally torture each and every woman in here, so be it.
This is a message of unity, and in fairness to him, Greg is the first to step up as penance for his premature fingernail extraction. They didn't really come up with an organized plan here, and so are only able to haphazardly squeeze 6% out of him. But Nick works in sustainability tech, says this is no good. They're using up too much precious energy. Then Sam chimes in to make sure they know that all them chemicals they want, they can be secreted through sexin, among other secretions. No one picks up on that, so they turn back to Greg and start ramping up the pain. Tara steps in to take the lead and really starts ad-libbing, trying out new things and feeling her power. She wants to know what Julian was talking to him about, but he claims ignorance. In response, she digs in with the screwdriver and pops off his kneecap, ignoring the fact that she will have her turn on the table. She sets an uncomfortable precedent before acting all like, "What? You all voted for this," when they call out her unrelenting brutality. Now that they've banked this experience, they start considering setting some ground ground rules moving forward. Tara and Taylor consider just letting the clock run out sans torture, so they have enough strength to fight their captors when they come back. But Nick points out that they have obvious remote signals going out here, plus a secondary tube on their necks that's already full, likely of some sort of poison, so they can probably be killed from a distance. They mostly agree with sticking to the plan other than Tara. Once they settle a bit, they decide to draw to see who's next. Lisa develops a method using broken dishes and numbers inscribed in blood. Then they somberly select their shards to determine their order, and the shards command Sam to go next. Trying to keep things interesting, they fire up the iron. But the first order of business...
Promise me you ain't gonna mess with my genitals.
No promises, bro. Tara does not like putting limits on her creative expression. Tony really goes in hard, making the whole place smell like burnt popcorn. With only a little left before hitting half his quota, he asks for the pliers, and knowing what it takes to get that 1%, they pull a couple of fingernails. Relieved to be done for now, Sam takes a breather in the recliner. Nick checks in on him just to build some goodwill for his turn and to waste as much time in between sessions as possible. And you can tell that it really means something to Sam. At an arbitrary point, they determine it's now Nick's turn, and he decides to do it on the bed. While he gets set up, Taylor and Lisa cry it out in the kitchen. They try to figure out how to use any latent mind powers they may have to push through this thing. Taylor then confides that she's pregnant, so she has extra concerns, and it's all so stressful. But then the memory of Kai tucking her stash into her boot gives her the idea to get high. Actually, she's squirreling it away to help her boo for his impending ravaging. Beforehand, Lisa chimes in to announce that Greg is awake and very badly injured, in case you were confused. This is actually perfect. If he isn't in condition to escape with them, why not squeeze him dry of his juice so they can each have a smaller obligation? All this violence has them so squeamish they tentatively agree to go along with this, Tony being the sole dissenter. With that settled, Sam starts pulling out fingernails like it's going out of style. When the fluids are slow to seep, Tara takes it personally and wants to see why Nick thinks that he's such a tough guy. Turns out Taylor screwed her boy. He was putting out low percentages due to his drug alteration, but they have no time to sort this out because it's now Lisa's turn and she's not going quietly. There's a brief moment where she thinks they may have forgotten her. But no, Sam is there to drag her away like a child trying to avoid getting her tooth pulled. Taylor has to sit this one out so she can try to come clean about the drugs and make amends with Nick. He wakes up to reveal that he's also not on board with the Greg plan. While they're busy pulling fingies, Taylor reveals her secret. Unfortunately, all of this is overheard by Tara, who wastes no time announcing it to the whole gang. There is a moral dilemma due to the pregnancy, except now with all these missing fingernails, no one is feeling very charitable. Hearing about these pills, Greg expresses his desire to pop one or two of them bad boys down his gullet. That would interfere with their vote, however. The vote to empty him like a ketchup packet for their own benefit. Nick nullifies the decision by handing the pills over, allowing him some relief and preventing the production of his precious liquids. Then, to get the vibe right again, Tony escorts Tara out of the conversation. With all that settled, they can focus back on the task at hand, literally, by each sacrificing a fist to the pot. Kai declines to pull her weight, but this doesn't prevent the others from going back for seconds. But before they can get off round two, Tara pops in to juice this mother, spilling the boiling water all up on his crotch before she gets put down again. She wakes up sometime later, curious about what percentage she contributed so far and ready to do her part, because, you know, the vote is sacred. But they took a new vote while she was out, and it is not favorable to her. In their zeal to taunt her, she gets a hand free and opens up a coin slot on Kai's neck that is really not going to endear her to them any further. But on the plus side, they can't kill her. They just need her to feel pain. To that end, it appears they've been studying up because they get real creative with their new methodologies. But in the end, they're down to an hour left and aren't quite juicy enough. With Tara tapped out and very little time left, they endeavor to go all out all at once. Nick harkens back to his childhood and recalls the acute pain of a broken collarbone. So the two bros make deep, sustained eye contact before Tony gets to wailing on them collars. And it works. This is, after all, a story of success in the face of adversity. The strange lady pops up to congratulate them and give them instructions for depositing their payloads. They line up to have their modules retracted and buy their way out. As they all file out, there's a cry for help from the lobby, prompting Nick to forge ahead and leave Taylor to work with Greg on getting his unit retracted. When he gets out, Sam's gone mental, slashing them all up before running off. While inside, Greg reveals that he is familiar with the perpetrators of this tragic offense. He's responsible for selling their high-end drugs, although he did not believe the rumors of how they were produced. Before, now he does. Despite this, he makes a final plea for mercy, but then expires, subtracting his contribution from the total and restarting the recording. This sends Taylor into a panic, looking for ways to inflict pain, including leaning into a hot plate and hammering a nail through her soft-boiled flesh. And she actually meets quota. What a trooper. This was all viewed by Nick, who has confronted Sam in some sort of control room. When Nick declines to let Sam go, he triggers the poison. Now believing he has a captive audience, he recounts his various experiences in this job right up until Nick jams him up with a knife. Nick finds some random pills and rolls the dice, finding them to be some sort of antibody. He then runs around like Johnny Appleseed, hoping they will take purchase to cultivate an orchard of living friends. Unfortunately, it is not meant to be. So, through the power of love, he finds the strength to leave all this behind him and venture out into the light. Sometime later, we catch back up with Nick at a diner. He's working through his trauma by way of eating waffles and waiting for the day that Diane shows back up again looking for fuel. Despite the lethargy from eating waffles every night, he manages to follow her after an unsuccessful fishing trip. She is incapacitated and he steals away into the night to do whatever our imaginations can conjure. There's not a lot that was confusing about the general outline here, so I'm going to spell out the rules and make some suggestions about how they could have done things better. But there was also a clear opportunity at one point for them all to escape. I'll be discussing that in the questions and concerns section. So basically, some cabal of sickos have created a fantastic designer drug out of a concentration of various chemicals that naturally occur in the body and are used to alter one's brain chemistry. What effect does the drug have? We don't know, but it's so desirable that wealthies are willing to pay significant cash to acquire it. So much cash that it's still profitable for them to put 3 pills in their own protective case like this. In order to get these sweet juices, they kidnap people and stick them into an automated house of torture. You come upstairs, the TV turns on, a woman explains the situation and what they want, then explains they have 24 hours to do it. They have remote modules on their necks that collect the liquids from their brains and track the overall quantity. These modules are also apparently tied into their central nervous system, because removing them is instant death. Although they didn't really explain that up front. There's also a kill tube on each module that contains some sort of caustic fluid that will kill you in about 10 minutes once released. Sam's an insider who works for the people, and he's here for unknown reasons. He was mostly a calming force, but it didn't seem like he really compelled any activity to commence. As a result, his presence was questionable and problematic, and so will be discussed further in the next section. Now, where they really went wrong here, the group that is that they did minimal amounts of discussion and planning before going full bore. If you have the wherewithal to be calculated about this, then calculate the damn thing. They determined what percent they each needed, ultimately deciding to break it up into 2 sessions each, then drew numbers to select the order. They tried to create a policy of some consideration for the subject, like no genitals. Lisa wanted no faces, and they indicated at that point that they should apply the courtesy of allowing the subject to set some of their own ground rules. This was partially driven by the uncertainty of what was outside those walls. For instance, if Greg got out but was unable to walk, would he be able to survive? But why not do that up front? Why would you ever start by saying whose turn it is, then going to town on them with various tools and with no order? The best thing to do would be to take a measured, controlled approach toward inflicting the pain, utilizing rules like what they came up with, but sorting those out first. Then some experimentation would be ideal. Is it best to redline someone and try to push the chemicals out through acute trauma? Or is a slower, consistent pressure more efficient and sustainable overall? You can't just decide you're going to go through with it, then turn around and take a hammer to someone's face. The premise here was pretty straightforward, although it doesn't appear that the individuals who produced this movie thought through the scenarios to a sufficient degree, like what you might expect to see in a Saw movie. They go through the trouble of kidnapping all these people and putting them in this fake house with some advanced technology in the hope that they'll produce some pain chemicals for them. Is this really the most efficient way to do this? They asked that question themselves by starting the movie showing someone getting juiced on an operating table. Why not just do that? And what was the point of Sam being in there? Was it necessary to have an insider checking things over? Because he also had to participate willingly, but he didn't seem to add much otherwise. What are the odds he would have been able to do this job multiple times without getting fatally injured at some point, even if by accident? What was his motivation, and what could they have possibly been paying him to compel him to do this? The film is pretty short on motivation. I believe they had the idea of how a mystery might play out, but never put together the requisite pieces to actually bring it together or make it intriguing. For instance, Greg and Julian knew each other. This doesn't come back around until later when Greg fesses up to being a drug dealer. But what does that matter, and why is his connection meaningful? It doesn't provide any new information when revealed, and it doesn't help them move forward in the plot. They also never explain what he did to warrant ending up in the cage. Just a whole lot of nothing. There's also the confusion introduced through inconsistent rule application. Why do the contributions get subtracted when someone dies? Couldn't they still access the chemicals? And why did Julian and Greg get subtracted from the total? But then they go through a whole ordeal to show them somberly gathering up Kai's body to deliver her final contribution before sending her out. If they were on the fence about Greg, they actually could have all gone out before him and been free, even if he died and the progress bar dropped below 100%. That's more of an oversight from the perspective of the captors, though. Much more importantly, and this is the point I referred to earlier in regards to how they could all get out, they could have used Kai's contribution to get one extra person out so they wouldn't have to worry about trying to drag Greg's lanky ass up to the extractor. Rather than sending through a dead body, they could have sent through a live person. There was also very little setup in regards to pushing them toward torturing each other, just a passing acknowledgement that they had tried to escape. But trust them, the place is impenetrable. It's a minor thing, but indicative of the overall sloppiness here. But they made it sound like Greg starting the torture is what started the timer. I listened several times and couldn't quite sort it out. Greg says they have no way of knowing how long they'd been out. Could have been days, and then they reprimand him for starting the timer. But they had been awake for a while due to trying to find a way to escape, and the timer had run down by several hours when we first saw it. So it didn't really happen that way, but also doesn't really matter one way or the other. The drama and conflict here and through other parts of the movie are highly contrived and mostly pointless. There's not a lot else to say about this movie that works in its favor that isn't also a specific reason why someone might want to watch it, so let's skip to that. Well, if you like torture porn, this was torture for its own sake. They set up a premise for one purpose only, and that was to deliver scenes of torture to our eyeballs. They did do that, and they did at least try to make it somewhat artistic and meaningful, even if they failed. With that said, the acting here is very questionable. The director appears to have gone on to do some other more successful projects, but this was very clearly an early work by an inexperienced movie maker. My guy could have stood to use a tripod here and there, and the music choices throughout the film were absolutely baffling. There are a variety of scenarios like that throughout the film, and it is jarring. I believe that this film does deliver on what its core audience would be looking for. If this isn't your type of thing, there isn't a lot that's redeeming about it, unless you're just curious or looking to do your own commentary with friends. In addition, it is hard to find in physical form, region coded for North America. So if nothing else, you could try to acquire it just for the status you get as a hardcore collector. Not to brag, but I showed my copy to all my neighbors, and they pretty much bowed down and started cleaning my feet with oils and spices. Now that we're here, I want to congratulate you for making it to the end of the video, and affirm that you are a very special person because of it. Before we go, I'd like to give a huge thanks to my donors, memorialized in the Hall of Headshots. I have a website set up where you can support the channel through donations or merch. Any donation unlocks a growing collection of uncensored movie recaps. And if you enjoyed the video, I would love for you to become part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.